Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today we are doing a special episode, so we're going to be talking about our top 5 items from 80s entertainment. We'll also include a stinker right before our number 1, as well as any honorable mentions, just in case. I did struggle with condensing it.
Well, there is a correct top five of the 80s entertainment. So
and it's
the
right.
fact that you couldn't cut it down, that's user error.
There's so many good choices, though.
I have like paragraphs proving that what mine is the top 5. So if we need to make an argument, I'm ready.
Well, I feel like she could make the argument because she spent most time in the
She
80s.
has
Nice.
spent.
Were
Well,
you
with that,
even alive in the 80s? I mean,
I
seriously. Come
spent
on
the
now.
last 8 months in the 80s.
let's just take a quick moment just to make sure that people have a clue as to who everybody is. My name is Sterling. This is our special guest.
I'm Bronwen, his sister. I was born in 1981, so spent most of the 80s alive.
I'm Mark. I'm basically their brother, essentially, from another mother. I spent
Father.
my 80s very, very short term, the last bit.
Mostly as a zygote.
Mostly.
So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the number 5. Oh, actually, I have a few questions. So first of all, I'm curious, how did we put together this list? Like, did you have how did you put together this list?
So for me, actually, like having lived through all of the 80s, and I'm not going to lie, Mark, I thought you were born in like 90, 91. So I was like, oh, so
99.
he's gonna go and like reflect on, the things that he knows about, or like, has gone back and looked, and he's like, yeah, I heard that, TV show or whatever. But for me, I thought about like, what do I remember growing up as a kid? What did I watch? What did I listen to? Like things that form that, where did those come from? And kind of went with that. I did look at like what movies came out, what TV shows were out, to see if there was anything I'd missed, or to kind of just refresh. Did it come out in the 80s, or had it come out in the 70s? And there are some things that I thought about that I remembered from then. And then like I was like, oh, as the 2020s are really cringy, and like maybe had been sort of something that I loved then, and now it's like I look back on and I'm like, I know times were different, but I could never get myself to like that now. But that's where I started from, was thinking sort of that nostalgic side of things.
So, as somebody that didn't spend a lot of time in the 80s, just a brief flash in the pan moment, I still had a lot of influence from the 80s. I watched a lot of, 80s movies, 80s television shows.
Your clothes were all hand downs from the 80s?
No, I'm an only child. My clothes were new, I think. I think. But basically, I chose movies that, are a little bit mainstream, but important to me. I love them. They all have a special meaning to me, so I'm excited to tell it.
For me, there were plenty of things that I think were extremely nostalgic to me, but what was kind of most important to me is, at this point in my life as an adult, what are the things that are the most resonant? So for me, I'm kind of going more for prestige rather than necessarily the things that really like warm my heart, which I do think will kind of answer my next question, which is, how much crossover do you think you might have?
Given what you
Or
just
we
said,
might like. Can you see an item 2, 3?
I thought maybe there would be some crossover. And we grew up together in the 80s. Like,
I wasn't.
I thought there might be some things that were, that's because you barely made it into the 80s, but
I made it.
I thought so. But what you just said makes me think that maybe there won't be. I wonder about maybe one, but I'm thinking there's going to be less crossover than I might have thought there would be.
I could see one item. I could see crossover between you two, possibly.
I think we might have some crossover, and I'm excited for it.
I might have one item that I could see somebody having, but with a top 5 list, I also see that there might just not be enough room for that one to have made it on. So I could possibly see that, but I'm going to say probably with myself, no crossover with the two of you.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so let's get into it. Number 5. So with this one, I wanted to start off with something fun, a biopic, but this one is something that I think has some fun because it is a period piece. So we've got some great costumes, we've got witty dialogue, we've got what I think is love for amazing music, but it's from a period of time, and yet they do such a good job of kind of bringing love to that. And that one is Amadeus.
Oh,
So,
yes.
and it kind of tells an interesting story because it's a very complex relationship between these two composers. One a genius and one kind of a conservative composer, and the relationship they had together. I think that compared to, I think that this is a biopic that people that maybe don't love biopics can really enjoy, and I feel like it was just a lot of fun. It wasn't necessarily completely true. I think they, went more for like a feel and a vibe rather than necessarily 100% capturing the truth of it. But I think that made it a great film rather than necessarily a great biography.
I've actually never seen Amadeus. And I know that I've heard wonderful things about it, and I have not seen it, so it did not make my list. But
That's okay.
it now is on a list to be watched.
Will not be the last time that's said. Is I have not from somebody at the
From someone
table.
born at the end.
I've probably seen things, maybe, who
Well,
knows?
I think I have another one that you might not. So
Okay.
I think it'll be said again.
I also think it's interesting. You say biopic, which I know there's some not controversy maybe, but is it
Shots
biopic?
fired.
Biopic, is it biopic? I say biopic. So I think it's
It's
funny
like
that you say
half the
biopic.
time I say it one way, half the time I say it another because it's like it's a bio picture. So like
Yeah.
biopic. I used to say GIF and now I say GIF because
That's the correct way to say it.
Yeah.
Come at me.
Okay. Well, my number 5 is, again, I'm going with nostalgia. So something that played a huge part in what I watched and lived and liked growing up. So this started as a comic, turned into a cartoon TV series, spawned movies, spawned another cartoon series, had action figures, toys. I wondered if this would come up for you at all in any way somewhere. Had sort of included a little nod to like Renaissance artists.
Okay.
I'm seeing that the ball isn't like
You're
dropping
killing
yet.
me.
Man?
It is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I I I have a comic on the ones that didn't quite make it,
Okay.
but I can see that.
I mean, I grew up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I absolutely adored them. They were amazing playing the arcade games
Yeah,
back in the day.
That's right. Video games.
They-
It spawned all of this, like these
Yeah.
different things.
And there's been 2 sets of movies. There's been at least 2 cartoons.
There's like
it's
7
reached-
movies.
Yeah.
Well, like 2 sets.
No, there's
As
like
in like
5 sets.
one
of
set and then
movies.
the
There's like 5 sets.
There's a lot.
They've made a lot of different
And
movies.
and there was a
Animated
more
movies.
recent cartoon
Yeah,
series,
right.
like a newer refresh.
So it's hitting multiple generations.
Yeah.
It's also amazing how like they can like it was originally a very gritty comic strip, and they
Yes.
have evolved and grown to be. They can be gritty turtles. They can
Yes.
be fun family turtles, where like
Yes.
the kids can enjoy them, and I think that the turtles are great.
I don't love the design of the current movies, like the Michael Bay
I
era.
haven't seen any of the current ones, the cartoon or the cartoon,
Just-
the series or the movies.
Especially Donatello for me.
The Michael Bay ones
It's
I've
like-
heard are not as good.
Well, I'm just specifically like the design of the
Right.
turtles. I'm not a big fan of.
Though I will say I've heard really good things about the new Seth Rogen animated movie of the Ninja Turtles that just came out, and it's
Okay.
probably regarded as one of the better Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. So
I feel like that's something we could watch together.
Yeah.
we could. All right, so for my number 5, I chose a Christmas movie, and I believe it's the best Christmas movie. And
Continue.
I think it's the best Christmas movie, and it tells the harrowing journey of John McClane and how he saves Nagatomi Tower. And my number 5 is Die Hard. For me, I feel like the 80s was a time of action,
Mhm.
action-packed movies, and I feel like Die Hard was one of the last action movies of the 80s. I think it came out in 89 or 88, around the time I did, so special place in my heart for it. But it's so well done. We see Alan Rickman as the
Yeah.
antagonist. He does a phenomenal job as Hans Gruber, Bruce Willis as John McClane, and it's the best Christmas movie. It's got a lot of action, not a lot of Christmas. It's great.
I I did definitely enjoy the movie. I'm not of the camp of it being a Christmas movie, but I know that there are diehard people that believe that it is a
It
Christmas movie.
literally is a Christmas movie. It's all the music in it is Christmas. When he hacks into the bank, they play Silver Bells.
For me, it's more like Christmas Vacation would be the number one. But
It like
but
takes
that's
not even
place during the holidays,
that's
but
not
that
even a
doesn't mean it's
Christmas
a
movie.
Christmas movie.
Oh, it's
yeah.
a Christmas. There's a Christmas tree. It's a Christmas party. It's a Christmas movie. Come at me.
Okay, that's fair. My number four. This is where I could see whether it's crossover on somebody else's list or even if it's just people that actually know what I'm talking about and kind of agree with me. So for me, this one is a movie that I think has an actor that is most known for their comedy and a comic genius. And yet I love them more for their dramatic roles. And I think that this one in particular really showed how much of a dramatic genius they were. And that one for me is Dead Poet Society. Absolutely love Robin Williams in it. I think it's a powerful movie. And it's going back and rewatching it. I don't know if you've ever seen it recently, but seeing how young the cast is, like seeing a super young Ethan Hawke, and absolutely killing it. Like they've got a great cast that's doing a great job that is very young. And it's interesting seeing where some of these people have gone in their careers since doing that movie.
It's a
So,
fantastic movie. It really
It
is a good one.
it
I
is.
haven't I haven't seen it in a long time, but
Same.
I feel like now the best part about doing these top fives is making me want to watch these movies
right.
Or rewatch them,
or
right?
rewatch them.
Yeah.
I am not surprised you had that. When I was looking to see like if I'd missed anything and I saw Dead Poet Society, for me it wasn't going to be in my top 5 or
Mhm.
10 even. It's a great movie, but I wondered if it would come up for you. I was like, I feel like cinematographically, like it was something you might want to
Right.
include for
Right.
various reasons. So not surprised.
Okay.
Okay, well, my top 4 is a TV series again,
Okay.
and it's a sci-fi series. Not something I normally don't like sci-fi. I don't know that I would have considered it sci-fi, but I saw like this is okay, this is what it is. It is something that has been referenced in pop culture kind of throughout the years. It also has recently seen a resurgence in a new
Does it
rebranded
start with a Q?
series. Maybe it does. It actually like had great music, some original music. They released a soundtrack of the series.
I don't remember the music in it at all. And I love that show.
It is, as it sounds like both of you have figured out, it's Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
Quantum Leaps
And
almost made mine.
Samuel Beckett.
The old
theorizing that one could time travel within his own
Yeah.
lifetime. Dr. Samuel Beckett, like I could still say like there's still things that I can think of, and it was something that was such a big part of it. Was such a great TV show.
We were just talking about this when we were kind of breaking down the recent episode of Foundation that we watched, is how science fiction can use these really weird premises in order to ask, philosophical questions or, questions about morality. And that is what this show did. Like every episode was really creating this interesting situation that allowed you to explore a question in a way that is difficult to do in a traditional medium.
Yeah.
So, love science fiction, love it.
love Quantum Leap. It's
Great.
great.
The reboot, have you seen any
I
of it?
haven't seen the
It's
reboot.
really not great.
Yeah.
I didn't think, it was just too similar. I didn't think it would, but it just didn't hit for me. It was pretty flat.
I feel like that's the problem when you try to like milk properties like, oh, we're bringing back Quantum Leap, and it's like Quantum Leap was so good, it did everything that it was supposed to do, that bringing it back, like, unless you're telling a crazy new stories,
Right.
like the philosophical aspect of things, like unless you're telling them the same stories, it's not going to get. So
And I kind of feel like that one might look like it stands the test of time, maybe with the exception of any time you see Ziggy.
Hmm.
You know, because it's spending time in different eras, and so you can't fault it for like he's in the 50s now, he's in the this time
Right.
period.
right,
Right.
You know, so it never necessarily looks period until you see maybe like Ziggy in his jacket. That's
yeah.
Right. Right.
For my number four, I feel like I went with all movies for my
Okay.
top five, actually. My number four is a movie that came out in 1984, I believe.
Okay.
It is a mystical world, and it
Let's
has
start with a W.
no,
Okay.
it starts with an L, and it stars David Bowie himself as the Goblin King, the Labyrinth.
That's not where I thought you were going.
The Labyrinth, one of my favorite movies of all time. It tells the story of a young Jennifer Connelly who is Sarah, who basically wishes for her little brother to be taken by the Goblin King. And the Goblin King takes him to the Goblin Realm. She goes to try to find him. He takes the baby to the center of a labyrinth. She has to go through the labyrinth to rescue her baby brother. She kind of hates her baby brother at the beginning of the movie.
I often wished that someone would take him to the Goblin Realm to be like a sacrifice for the Goblin King.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the labyrinth was based off of you guys,
And
your history.
Except I don't know that I would have gone to find him, regardless of anything.
She didn't want to either, but she was kind of like pushed to do it.
I don't know that you could have. At that point in my life, I don't know that. Well, actually, though, maybe then in the early 80s, it was still okay.
But it's so great. The creatures were made by Jim Henson's Creature Shop.
Mhm.
It's like an allegory against like capitalism in this weird way, with uh, literally the antagonist being played by a rock star, like
Right.
somebody that you would give a ton of money to, and I think it still holds up, and it's wonderful.
And I like the use of practical effects versus, I mean, not that they were doing digital effects at that time,
Right.
but maybe like puppetry versus like stop motion or something like
Right.
that. But I I do feel like that's held up a little bit better. You know, it still looks a little bit like puppets, but I think that looks better than like the stop motion stuff that they did in some other ones. I never actually saw that one,
I think
but
you
I did
would love
watch.
that
What was
movie.
the
Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal?
Dark Crystal. Yep.
Did watch that one, so I Labyrinth is on my list.
I think Labyrinth's better than Dark Crystal. Has great soundtrack too. Like
And then I also watched the Dark Crystal series on maybe Netflix.
How was that?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was
I didn't see that.
I
yeah.
haven't seen any of those three
Yeah.
things.
They're weird. The Jim Henson Creature Workshop, I love them. Their creatures just they feel real. You know,
Yes.
like without it, you know,
Yeah.
even though you can tell that they're puppets, it's like they feel like they're part of the world.
Okay.
I think that the puppeteers do a good job of bringing them to life.
Agreed.
You can see the emotion coming out. Like there's real craft that goes into that,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think it really shows. All right, so we are on to our number 3. So for this one, I have a foreign director with a huge impact,
Doesn't surprise me he went foreign.
but huge impact on cinema. In fact, this director created a genre of film in the 60s. So the film is Once Upon a Time in America. The director is Sergio Leone.
Okay.
He created the spaghetti westerns. He is one of the most influential directors in the history of cinema. I love his cinematography. I love like those super tight shots followed by really lengthy long shots. Great storytelling. Like I said, the fact he created an entire genre, the fact that he was an Italian making very American films that, you know, so many other people followed. And I felt like this was a great example and told a really great story. So that is my number 3, and it barely made it. It was his last one, and he was working on it for a decade. he gave up working on the Godfather. They asked him about making that one,
Wow.
and he passed
Wow.
on making that because he
Wow.
was working on this.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and great music, like and Enrico Marcone. I don't remember exactly what his name is, but like his,
Right.
Uh,
like
yeah.
He basically
his
pioneered the Western music tropes.
his films are just absolutely amazing, and this one as his last one, I think stands up.
Interesting.
I've never seen it, so that is
Same.
on my list.
Hadn't even heard of it. So,
I've heard of him. I know the director, but I haven't seen this one of
okay.
his. I've seen the Fistful of Dollars
Mhm.
and
For a few dollars more, and
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going very much the opposite. Like yours is a little more, not quite academic, but it's a little more
Elitist, some might say.
elitist. Yes, and I'm going much more popular. Like
Office.
not yes. So my top three, number three, is a movie, and it is something that was very popular with an actor that was very popular who continues to be popular
Okay.
to this day. It is something that it spawned some spoofs, really popular spoofs, parodies. It actually sort of helped launch and was part of like the creation of the TV shows JAG and then NCIS. Just in terms of like some of that, like what went into it. I think the visual effects were really cool. The soundtrack was really great and has been one of the great soundtracks recognizable. As a kid, I loved some of the one-liners that I thought were funny. I could recite this movie to you almost forward and backwards back then. It just came out with a sequel this summer, like
Okay.
20 some years later or 30 some years later.
It's now.
It is Top Gun.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
It made me want to be a pilot, and so
How did that work out for you? Did you?
She has glasses.
yeah, I mean,
Oh.
well, not only do I have glasses, like I don't know if you know, I have them highly compressed, but I'm almost blind without them, so it's not something that would ever work for me. You
That's
wouldn't
not
want me to fly a
Yeah.
plane you were on.
That's not what Maverick would say.
This stuff is bulletproof.
That's
That's that.
flying jets. You don't even need an outfit or anything. You just got your bolt. Perfect. Set.
I actually haven't seen the latest one. I've heard good stuff about it, and I've heard that it is kind of a return to the films before modern and kind of like postmodern films that I think are telling simpler tales, and not necessarily in a bad way. But so I am interested in watching it. It's not quite like the genre that I would normally watch, but it still sounds like it is a good follow up film from everything I've heard.
It's a movie you watched a lot of also when we were growing up.
Yes,
Maybe because you had to if I was watching it, but I think you liked
I
it. You
enjoyed it. I
repeated
did.
a lot of the
I did.
lines.
Yeah.
Sterling's favorite part is the volleyball scene. That's his number one part. Mine too, though. So like, you can't fault it. Fun fact, actually, Dawn, your wife, and I worked by where they filmed a lot of them.
Yes. Yeah.
That little bar, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a fun little factoid.
Yeah.
My number three is a classic. It is a beloved classic. I think a lot of my ones that I chose are ones that are hard to do remakes of. Like they were made, nobody's made a remake of them yet. No sequel. Well, there might be some sequels later, but nothing remade. But this one is very popular. I could quote this movie forward and backward easily, and it was based off a book,
Oh, I think I know where we are.
The Princess
Princess
Bride.
Bride. Yeah. When you said
Such a
forward and
classic.
backwards, one of the recent covers of it is it an ambigram, I think, when the
Oh.
word upside down spells the same thing.
You can flip
And so it
yeah.
has Princess Bride in, I think it's an ambigram.
Wow.
Love it. I could quote it so
It's-
much as well.
It's so timeless. Like, yes, it's a story about princess and this guy rescuing the princess, which sounds so traditional, but there's so many like nuggets in this movie that make it so great. Whether it be the story being told to a sick kid from his grandfather, or the little jokes here and there, that just these quippy one-liners. Everything is acted perfectly in it, And, I love it. And it is timeless. It's classic. Princess Bride,
It's
number
great.
3.
And that it's a good framing technique and kind of an interesting way to tell the story to start off with,
Mm-hmm.
the grandfather telling the story and sometimes having to skip parts
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
the kid isn't interested.
Mm-hmm.
And, but then also having somewhere like he puts in a little bit of it because it's important to
Mm-hmm.
the story.
Right.
So
Right.
it's definitely interesting framing technique. One of my friends read the book, and I think that he said that
It's a
it's
bridge.
actually done in a similar way where
Oh,
it sounds like it is part of a larger story that
interesting.
has been shortened,
Hmm.
but it isn't like
That's how
like
it was written.
that's how
That's
it was written.
interesting.
Yeah,
But it is technically it's abridged. And
Okay.
every version of the Princess Bride book is abridged, but
Okay.
there's no full story.
right.
Interesting.
And it's so popular that during the pandemic, there was that whole shot for shot reenactment that all the celebrities did. I don't know if you've
See
seen
that
this.
now.
I don't
They
think I have.
they filmed all of Princess Bride, and it's all celebrities like doing like one bit from the movie. So
Oh.
like Dave Bautista is Fezzik at one point, and it's if you haven't seen it yet, highly recommend go looking for the celebrity version of
I'll
Princess
have to
Bride.
check
It's
it.
fun.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like fun. My number two. Okay, so we've got a director here that I think everything that they have done has been gold, and they have done a number of different genres, and every one of them has been gold, which that's tough to do. That's tough to have all of your films be good, much less be able to do comedy, be able to do science fiction,
I think
uh,
I know, but
horror, to be able to do war movies. And so, I
I
mean,
think I know
they're
the director,
same. That's where I'm thinking.
but
where do we think we
the
are?
director's Spielberg,
That's what I thought for the director.
E.T.,
Everything
Jaws.
he's done has been great.
I
I
mean,
didn't
he's done a lot of
necessarily
good
think
stuff.
so, but I
Everything,
think that's where you're.
everything.
I think that's where you're.
Stanley Kubrick. Everything
Oh,
he has done has been gold. I
that's
love
fair.
Spielberg, but not everything
Interesting.
he's done has been gold.
That's fair.
That's just where I thought you
I
were
know. That's what
going.
I was trying to think. Director that's done
Well,
everything.
every
Yeah.
like type of
So which movie by Kubrick?
So we have Full Metal Jacket for this one.
Full Metal Jacket.
And Vincent D'Onofrio's performance is absolutely haunting. I absolutely love the drill sergeant in it, who was actually a drill sergeant in real life and does such a great performance. Once again, talking about cinematography, Stanley Kubrick is somebody who really understands that, who is so fastidious with every single shot that he does, so intentional with everything he does, methodical, absolutely amazing. And the interesting thing is that even though it takes place during the Vietnam War, it's not so much telling the story of the Vietnam War as much as it is telling the story of turning soldiers into killers. And so I feel like that is something that can stand the test of time and continue on from war to war and not just be tied to this one.
I've also never seen Full Metal Jacket, but I've
Same.
seen a lot of parts of Full Metal Jacket. I've never watched it all the way through.
Okay.
And as I've always thought, the movie's pretty anti-war, right? Like it's telling the story of how to turn these people into killers, but it's kind of like that, like anti-war.
I think
A little bit.
you can see it like that. You can also see it as the dehumanizing of what war does and the necessities of that. So I don't that could just speak to like how do we handle these things. I don't think it necessarily has to talk about because it's a good chunk of it is with the drill sergeant before we
Right.
actually get to the war, and then we do see the effects of that later. And
One of the
so
most iconic scenes, the Flight of the Valkyries,
is
where the helicopters come in and just destroy.
that one in this?
In what?
It's been a long time.
I've
The
never seen it.
That's just like the most iconic scene of Full Metal Jacket, where like they play Flight of the Valkyries and they go in and they just
I've never.
It's
Very
been
nice.
I haven't seen these movies
and it made on
You
his
haven't seen these
list.
movies?
in a long time.
Oh,
In a long,
okay.
I haven't seen any of these
I
movies.
chose my list of movies I've never seen before.
This is
That's what I thought.
this is somebody else's top 5 list, and I memorized.
He printed it out. What a guy.
Yeah.
So I
Word for
haven't
word.
seen Full Metal Jacket, but it has as you said, Vincent D'Onofrio, and he is in my favorite version of Law and Order, Criminal Intent.
Mm.
And I loved him in there. And I have obviously, like you said, seen clips of Full Metal Jacket, but when you said that, I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's great, and he's the great new Kingpin for Marvel.
Yeah.
He kills it as
Oh,
Kingpin.
hmm.
He's
Honestly,
just a great actor,
he
period.
really is. He's got a good scope of range that he can
Mhm.
pull off.
Yeah. So my top two is a movie, but I first read the book, which predated the movie.
Was it in the 80s? Was the book in the 80s? Because you
I
can't use it
think
if it wasn't
so.
in the
But if
80s.
the movie was, and I'm also going to talk about that, actually, I think it was,
I
I
just
think the
used it.
book came out in the 80s as well. And it actually was an author. My dad still may love this author, but it was like my dad's favorite author. We had a bunch of his books growing up. It was a book that I loved reading when I was a kid. I still love reading, but I loved to read. And we had all these what seemed like great books on the shelf. And I picked up this book and it forever changed my life. At the time in particular, it made it almost impossible for me to shower without being terrified about a killer clown crawling up from the water, from the sewer.
Mhm.
What is it called?
What is it called?
What is it? The movie that you're talking
It
about.
is by Stephen
Oh my
King. 8-year-old me thought that this would be a great book to read along with Cujo, but when I watched the movie, it was actually very disappointing. I thought it wasn't scary. It was kind of funny. Just like most of everything on my list, it has had a resurgence in some movies.
Yeah. I haven't seen the second of
And
the new
I haven't
ones.
seen the second because I thought the first was so bad. And I know this is like controversial. So many people loved it. I thought it was more like a comedy because it was so bad.
Really?
I
I
just did
liked
not
the
enjoy it.
Skarsgård. I don't remember which.
It,
There's
Alex Skarsgård. It's
yeah,
the son
uh,
of
I just didn't,
there's a hundred
it didn't
Skarsgårds.
work for me. But that book messed me up. And I was going to say the F bomb, and I didn't know if I was allowed to do that
You
or
could say the
kept
F-bomb.
censoring me. Great.
Yeah,
Just not in the
It
first 10 minutes.
it fucked me up as a
yeah.
child. Like it made me terrified to shower. And as you see, I am very blind. So having to shower without having my eyes was terrifying as a kid because I can't see anything. And it just, it messed me up for a long time.
And so it's your favorite? It's your number two?
It was so impactful, but also it was a great book. Like it was terrifying, but it was a great book. And it had a big impact. And despite it being like a negative impact in so many ways, it was a great book. And I read Cujo, which also that one didn't mess me up in the same way, but it was like it kind of also spawned some of that. And there's so many of his other books I didn't like after. It was like some of those were like some of the best that I had read at the time, and I was just like, this is amazing
Right.
and also terrifying. Like it was amazing if I wasn't showering.
Yes.
It didn't make me afraid of seeing a clown in the sewer, but it messed up my showering experiences.
Here's this book that caused me all this trauma. Thankfully,
It's my
it's
top
my
two.
number two.
And he's got so many great
He
books,
does.
and then so many adaptions from those books that, whether it's TV or movies, and there's been a variable mix in. I mean, I would also say a variable mix in the quality of his books because he is prolific.
He's
So that
made a lot.
they're not always
Correct.
bangers, but
Correct.
the great ones are absolutely great. And then similarly, I think the adaptions, they're not all bangers, but man, the great ones are absolutely great.
Oh yeah. He is like the horror writer for a reason. Like he is, he makes great work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So my number two, I'm actually dressed as currently. This movie, I feel like, does time travel right, well written, great cast, and my number two is Back to the Future. I was gonna put all three of them because it is a trilogy, the best trilogy in my opinion. But since I think the third one came out in the 90s, I'm only sticking with Back to the Future original, but I do love the third one. It's a great character study of Doc and Marty. Absolutely love it.
And it is an interesting interpretation of time travel, because you did say that it did a great interpretation of it.
Yes.
There have been a number of different ones. I do like this kind of storytelling.
Yes.
I do like the more complex, like Primer.
Primer is very hard and very difficult to understand.
You have to like take notes. You have to
Yes.
like study it, watch it 10 times. And then when you've watched it 10 times and taken notes, then watch a video on somebody else explaining how it actually works.
That movie,
but it is like yours is a great interpretation of time travel.
I feel like it was one of the first ones that did it accurately enough where like it made time travel feel real without like breaking rules and doing weird stuff. Like they have a very set rules to their time travel in the universe.
All right. So I think at this point we take a break from the top five and we instead do our stinkers. So this is something from the bottom of the 80s for. And at this point I'm going to have to do some reading because I wrote down some quotes from some critics on this one. So first of all, my stinker is both a shameless ripoff of an 80s classic movie as well as just like shameless commercials. So I'm going to have to edit out a few things so you don't know what I'm talking about. So in this one, it is talking about what is being shamelessly ripped off. It's an amazing bald-faced copy of blank. Even though this is blank in a sticky wrapper, left under the heater 2 hours too long. My next one. Watching It's made me stupider. Buying it would have also dropped me a few social classes. Another critic said, the filmmakers even have the gall in the movie's parting shot to announce a sequel. A sequel never came out of this. Another critic said, a film that warms your heart with rage. And then I really like this one. We'll go ahead and just reveal it at this point. I'll just read the quote.
Okay.
Do you know?
I do not know.
Mac and Me is a 99-minute commercial occasionally interrupted by a not-so-good children's movie. And there's one thing that makes this even... So it's a bad film, and it's a terrible retelling of E.T., and it's also a shameless plug for McDonald's as well as Coke and maybe Skittles or something else. But something that actually makes it kind of enjoyable, or at least an enjoyable connection, is through Paul Rudd, Conan O'Brien, and starting with the finale of Friends. So starting way back when Paul Rudd was on Friends, Paul Rudd has been doing this thing on many of the times he goes on to Conan's show, where he's supposed to show a clip of the movie he's in, or in this case, he's supposed to show a clip from Friends. And instead of showing a clip from it, he shows a clip from this movie, Mac and Me. And it's a terrible, terrible clip.
If you would have started with that, I would have got that instantly. If you would have said Paul Rudd movie clip, Conan O'Brien, I would have known Mac and Me.
And he's been doing it for so long. And every time he manages to convince Conan O'Brien that he's not doing it, he's like, no. That like the producers are really mad that I've done, like, they will not let me do this. Or he'll show the clip and then Conan will be like, but you have to actually have a clip of the movie, right? And he's like, yeah, I did bring a clip of the movie. Go ahead and roll the clip this time.
Roll Ant-Man. Let's get Ant-Man going.
It's so good.
So,
but then he does the clip again.
Were Paul Rudd and Conan O'Brien in the movie together?
No, not either.
Okay, why does he do this to, like, Conan, right?
It's just his brand at this point. At this point, he just has said, every time I'm on a talk show, Mac and Me.
Right.
And he does it with such a straight face every time.
And then he will even comment about the movie and like mention one of the actors in the movie and be like, oh, I can't believe that so-and-so did that performance when it's clearly a clip from that. Meanwhile, you see just Conan's head, like buried in his hand as Paul Rudd is like talking in a very straight manner about the movie, but in relation to the clip that we just saw.
I've never seen the movie.
Don't
I
recommend it.
haven't even seen this clip, or at least I can't think that I've seen this clip, but now I'm curious, and it will be something I'm doing right after.
And if you enjoy, okay, so the clip is good. There's a whole montage of all of the clips where he's been on
Oh, yeah.
Conan. Extremely enjoyable. And then if you are somebody who enjoys watching bad movies that are so good that they're bad, along the lines of like Trolls 2 and The Room, then this might be a movie that you can actually get enjoyment from.
I
You-
like Trolls 2. It's a great movie. I thought it won an Oscar.
But what's the movie that it's like the ripoff of?
E.T.
E.T.
Because he's got a little alien friend.
Yeah.
See, I still
And
don't know.
the alien even looks like somebody described ET to a child, and then that
A
child,
blind child.
and then that child like made a mold of ET based off that description, and that's what they used.
I'm so curious.
It's great. It's a wonderful clip. Highly recommend.
Yeah,
Wow.
and so that is my stinker.
And have you seen the movie though?
I've
Like, you've
watched the movie,
Okay.
and I did enjoy it for that whole like knowing that it's bad. It's so bad it can be good.
Did you watch it as an adult or as a child?
As an adult.
Okay.
It was I only found out about it from the Paul Rudd stuff.
Right. That's
It was from
Okay.
YouTube clips of Conan that I found out about this movie, and then at that point I was upset. Like that's actually the way I got into The Room, was from clips of it. It started with like seeing all the worst parts of a terrible movie and then saying to myself like, this is so bad, I have to watch it.
Mm.
I will say that Mac and Me almost ended up on my list just because of the Paul Rudd and Conan O'Brien bit. That almost ended up
Wow.
there just because it's so funny.
Okay. So curious now. But so my stinker is actually one that like I don't think I would classify it as like the worst movie I've seen or like, anything that I would absolutely hate. That's I think is just the worst thing ever. But for me it's a stinker because it was so popular and it is something that I never liked. I never got it. I never enjoyed it. But it was so popular at the time by an actor that was incredibly popular at that time. He has done and still does a lot of weirder movies. I also, just as an actor, never really loved him, which is also probably a very unpopular opinion. He
Uh-oh.
continues to act to this day. He's been involved in a very public
So
legal.
the fact that you don't like him hasn't stopped his career, is what you like. He's
Shockingly,
still
no. My personal like not going to his movie
that
has
didn't
not
bring him to his knees.
not at all.
Oh,
Anyway, we're talking about Beetlejuice, and
I'm out.
wait,
Beetlejuice is great.
is this your number one?
No, it's not my number one. It almost made my list. It almost made my list.
No,
I
it
It
do love.
almost made your list.
Yeah, I do love
Yeah.
Beetlejuice. I love Tim Burton. So the fact that this is your stinker, I'm appalled.
But like
Again, it's my stinker because it's so popular. Like you said, right? It would have been on your list. Almost was on your list.
It was.
It just didn't. It for me, it wasn't right. It was weird. I didn't
That's
get
what makes
part
it
of
so
it.
and I like that
I don't like that
interpretation.
genre.
Like that I think that we've thought about the stinker as like something that is kind of like objectively bad.
Right.
Versus I do like that idea of something that was in the zeitgeist that a number of people very much enjoyed, but it's something that didn't hit for you.
Yeah.
Like for you, it stuck.
Wait, I do have one question though. What legal trouble? Who are you talking about that's in legal trouble?
Johnny Depp?
He's not in Beetlejuice. That's Michael Keaton.
Why Why do I think Beetle? Or
Well, Johnny Depp was
Because
Edward
Johnny Depp
Scissorhands. Him and Tim Burton.
been in all the
Tim
other- they're
Burton
like-
is, I think,
like
what I'm
Johnny
thinking.
Depp and Tim Burton are
You're-
like-
They're like two
and I
peas
do
in a
know that.
Michael Keaton
But
has
in
never
my-
done
I
anything
know.
wrong.
I mean, okay, this is like
And his
how much I
career
watched
hasn't-
the movie.
his career hasn't been stopped by the fact that you can't even recognize him.
Oh God!
You don't even know who he is. Wow.
Okay, so it's Beetlejuice that I don't like,
Yes.
which yes, I do remember as Michael Keaton.
And you don't like
but Edward
somebody not
Scissorhands-
from Beetlejuice,
Johnny
so
Depp.
also related to Beetlejuice. This is like 6 degrees of separation. So it's like
Okay.
I don't like Beetlejuice, which reminds me of a film made by the same director that had a person I also don't like.
I think what it is
Johnny
is
Depp started in the
Johnny
80s,
Depp would have been great in that role. And I don't know.
That's
It is
even worse. Like,
yeah, that is very embarrassing.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
Anyway, the movie is what I don't like, but I also have not generally been a fan of Johnny Depp's work, which also I think is unpopular because so many of his movies have been popular. But specifically, take the fact that Johnny Depp isn't in it aside. It is Beetlejuice.
you know what? That's
that I
the
don't
best
like.
part of the movie is
The fact that Johnny Depp is not in Beetlejuice. That is why it's a good movie.
It just came off my stinker list. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, Johnny Depp's not in here? On the stinker list.
Thanks, Mark, for letting me publicly humiliate myself.
I didn't mean to publicly humiliate you. I just didn't know who was in legal trouble. I was curious.
Okay, well, yeah, that was awkward.
I
Well,
love it.
I will help this awkward transition into my stinker, which I think is a terrible movie. This movie is a sequel to the original. It came out 6 months after the original. So think about that.
That's
Before a sequel came out, like it got greenlit, filmed, produced 6 months after the other one.
Okay.
And this movie, the title of this movie has been iconic for sequels everywhere. Anytime there's a sequel of something, and this movie is called Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo. This is where it came from.
I was about to say, like, I've heard that many times, and I don't think I've ever known the original like progenitor of that.
It came from Breakin' 2. This movie is about breakdancers, and there's no plot to this movie. They're trying to save this like community center.
So it's just breakdancing.
It's literally
it sounds like a good movie so far.
It's not because, like I said, there's no plot.
80s music and breakdancing.
I didn't say 80s music. I just said breakdancing. I can't actually remember the music in it, but it's not a great. It's not a great film. I'm gonna be real.
I mean, I've never heard. I've only heard references to that part of the name. I don't even know the original movie.
I've heard Electric Boogaloo,
right?
Like that. Not
and
even
like
in reference to it being like
Electric
that.
Boogaloo.
Yes.
Like something too.
Correct.
Electric Boogaloo.
Yes.
That's
but I
where it
didn't
came
know
from.
that. Like
Breakin'.
I've never seen. I had never even heard of. Even the first movie, I'd never heard of.
There's a reason for that.
So does that mean that it's negative, where it like jumps? Is that like jumping the shark, where that is a phrase that now has significance about
a sequel,
what they're doing?
Exactly.
So like that means it's going to be like a crappy sequel. Like
not necessarily a crappy sequel. I think anybody just like ships it to a sequel. So like in How I Met Your Mother, I think there was like the playbook. Barney has the playbook, and then he gets the second playbook, and it's the playbook to Electric Boogaloo.
Okay.
Like it's like that kind of reference.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a bad reference, even though it is acclaimed as a very terrible movie because there's no plot. It's just I got to dance here, got to dance there, got to dance here. We're saved. We did it. We saved America. Who danced?
Okay, so one more brief segue before we get back to the number one, which are honorable mentions. And this is a chance for me to redeem myself from like the things that I consider to be some of the best things in cinema from the 80s to also talking about some things that are nostalgic to me. So maybe some things that resonate with the rest of you a little bit more. So Calvin and Hobbes, you had mentioned a comic, and that's actually where my heart went.
I love
with
Calvin
comics.
and Hobbes. I didn't know that was from the 80s. I love that.
Some of Shel Silverstein's books.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Some of Roald Dahl's books, like Matilda.
He didn't make it onto my list, even honorable mentions, but it was something I thought of a lot.
Some of Douglas Adams' books, like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books. I don't think the first one, but like some of his stuff.
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is some of the best books out there. The trilogy told in 6 parts.
Yes, yes. Some of the Dragonlance books, very near and dear to my heart. And then Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I didn't realize that started in the 80s.
At least some of the episodes. And then also, while it's like the very beginning of the 80s, I think the fourth Doctor from Doctor Who, his run ends right at the beginning of the 80s. So like
Still
I can
counts.
squeeze
Exactly.
I can and
the fourth Doctor.
And that leads us into Peter Davison, who I very much enjoyed as like the fifth Doctor. So, but since I was going with like prestige stuff, that couldn't quite make it on there. But these are things that are very nostalgic to me that otherwise would have made it on if maybe the list was longer.
Gotcha.
Okay. So my honorable mentions are they run the gamut, and I really struggled with my top 5 in terms of like their TV, their movies. But these are a little bit more varied. There's like video game, board game, and anyway. So, but they're still nostalgic for me. I still stuck with that. I didn't go into kind of like your territory where it was like this, is it a cinematic genius or something? I can't think of the words right now. But anyway, cinematography was the word I was looking for.
There it is.
But The Last Unicorn.
Oh, that's kind of scary, actually, The Last
It
Unicorn.
is kind of scary, but also, so as a kid, I remember I loved it. I loved the story of it. I didn't love, but it was like this sort of really sad, scary-ish movie, but has this really like happy ending, it seems like, as a kid. And then it's actually so much deeper.
Oh, yeah.
As you realize, it actually has like an amazing cast list in terms of the voices, people that could easily be in like a regular great movie. Anyway, Super Mario Brothers video game,
that's a good
right?
one.
Like the classic video game,
Classic,
Nintendo,
Oh, gee.
NES, right? Trivial Pursuit, the board game.
Okay.
Which technically I think came out like in the very late 70s, but was very, very
Which
popular.
is not something you would play today.
No. I mean, I think people do, and there's like...
I'm not saying people don't. Like,
oh, would I play? No.
Yes.
No, and really never even played it much at any point, but it was really popular in the 80s. Our parents played it a lot.
Competitively.
Very competitively.
Like, we had a neighbor next door, or like a house or two down, and they would have very competitive matches of Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah.
It was mainly, I think it was really like my mom and him were like really the contenders. There might have been some other people sitting and occasionally like
just those
rolling
like
dice
my,
and
like my dad,
and
maybe.
getting questions wrong.
Your mom's the one that nobody wants to play with.
Or that you want to be on her team.
Or team, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was something I think that spawned an interest in board games for me. Like, I really wanted to play it. It seemed so fun. It was also this intellectual game, which I really liked that aspect of. No, you're right. I would never play it now. It doesn't matter what version, 80s version or like, some pop culture reference. But it's something that I think is neat because it is... like now I love board games so much. It's such a big part of things. Right. And that was like the first board game that I had any interest in of any kind. Yeah. And my last one that was a really close contender for me, but I left it off my top 5.
Because it wasn't a top 6?
Top 5.
No, I left it off my top 5 specifically because it did come out in the 80s.
Okay.
But I didn't find it until the 90s, didn't watch it until the 90s. Okay. It's a TV series. It's a British TV series. But specifically, no. I did like Doctor Who sometimes, somewhat. But it's specifically, for me, my list are things that had an impact on me during the 80s, when I was in that period that I was growing up. And so because it impacted me in the 90s, that's why it didn't make it for me. But that is Blackadder.
Oh, so good.
British comedy. It has Rowan Atkinson.
Hugh Laurie. With his actual British accent. Like,
God.
Yes, I think a lot of people don't realize that Hugh Laurie is not American because he sounds so American.
Oh, yeah.
And he is so British in this one.
I know he's British from 101 Dalmatians, the live action one with Glenn Close, because Jasper, and he uses his British accent.
Okay.
That's how I knew he was.
He uses his actual accent.
Yeah, he speaks normally.
but like in different periods of time. So it might be like a little bit more like posh, like 1700s.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
great.
that is mine. That for that reason didn't make it into my top 5 because it didn't impact me in the 80s.
That's
Okay,
fair.
that's fair.
My honorable mentions, I wanted to stay away from a lot of the big blockbusters. I wanted to do these movies that were timeless, that nobody's made a remake of them. So a couple of my, you know, honorable mentions would be things like E.T., which is great. I love Empire Strikes Back is probably my favorite Star Wars movie ever, and it came out in the 80s. I would say like Jaws, of course, like the big staples, but these were the blockbusters. I didn't want to use those. But my main honorable mention, I would say, would be My Neighbor Totoro, because this movie was my introduction to Studio Ghibli. And from that moment on, I've loved everything that they've done. Phenomenal work. But this one I rented at Blockbuster on a VHS countless times. I probably broke our local Blockbuster's VHS because I would just rent it, go get it again, watch it again. And I absolutely love My Neighbor Totoro.
Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is another Ghibli one. That's in the 80s, and that could have made a larger list for me.
Oh yeah, anything Studio Ghibli does is great.
I've never heard of that movie.
It's probably because it's animated and you don't watch animation. So.
I mean, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is on my list as my top 5.
Literally from when you were a child.
The Last Unicorn, Land Before Time.
Those were honorable mentions, actually. So,
they made it onto my list. Yeah. But I think it's the anime feature part of it, or feature part. But the anime part of it is something I never really got into anime. I've never.
Anime is just animation. So like Land Before Time, you got into anime. You got into Western anime.
But it's not, as you corrected me a little while ago when we were talking, it's not a cartoon, it's anime.
Yeah.
And I specifically feel like I was watching cartoon. Okay, when you corrected me and said it wasn't the same thing, now you're trying to say it's the same thing.
And I feel like the target audience is different. I feel like anime, where some of it may be made for children, there's quite a bit of it that is not meant for children at all. And even the stuff that is meant for children generally is meant to appeal to a wider audience. Like, it can be enjoyed by adults.
One of the ones that almost made my list.
They're much more mature, I think.
Honorable mention, Akira. I thought was going to be on your list.
Oh, I thought that I was changed anime, because I don't remember the exact stat, but it was like they used to animate on the whatevers,
right?
And basically like every other frame,
right?
Because it's expensive to animate every frame. And so I don't remember the exact statistics, so please don't correct me on this. But Akira animated twice as often, which was just a huge thing to do. Plus, great story, great characters. So it was revolutionary at the time of having this more fluid style of animation versus this kind of and that took a lot of money to do that for a cartoon, to have to do all of that extra animation.
And you might not have seen Akira or have heard of Akira, but you've definitely seen some type of media replicate the Akira bike stunt where he slides on his bike in this certain way, and it has been replicated many times. Yeah. So you've probably seen that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so number ones. Okay, so here we go. This one I have a movie based off of a book where the author of the book has publicly and a number of times said didn't like this interpretation, and yet audiences and film critics for the most part agree that this is an absolute masterpiece. Right? This is okay. I feel like you should possibly be on there because we were talking about this.
Okay.
This is Stanley Kubrick, and this is The Shining, which is a Stephen King novel.
Okay.
So it's like Stephen King, Stanley Kubrick, a meeting of the two minds.
We were just in Estes Park yesterday, which is where the Stanley Hotel is located, which is where Stephen King got his inspiration for The Shining.
Correct.
It's not where it was filmed, but it's where he got the inspiration to write the book.
Right.
So it's pretty timely as well.
And it's interesting because I feel like most of the time when you have, an author not liking the representation of their work, it generally is also not a great
Right.
work in and of itself. And I think in this case it's like Stephen King, this is his baby. Kubrick definitely took some liberties with it, and he's
Yeah.
not happy with those liberties. But man, for me and for so many other people, separating the two works and looking at The Shining as just a film, the there's not like it's a slow burn of a horror. There's not a lot that happens early on. And yet, because of his amazing eye for cinematography, he makes us feel unhinged and like uncomfortable throughout so that tension does build until that point where it actually happens. Those steady cam shots where we're following Danny, or those, like very far out kind of shots. All of these different tricks that are being done kind of help to create that feeling.
Yeah. So there's actually another thing with, I don't know if it was Stanley Kubrick that decided this or Jack Nicholson, but when the camera is on Jack Nicholson and he's doing something,
Mm.
periodically throughout the shot, he'll look at the camera. Like he'll be like doing something, but just glance over. And it's like he knows we're there. It's like a subtle fourth wall break that just like adds this little extra like, does he know we're there? Is he like looking at
I
us
was
every
gonna
time he's going through this shit? It's
the,
it's
Creepy.
crazy.
the funny thing about you saying that is like that watching somebody descend into homicidal madness is like the
Yeah.
one time you don't want to be seen.
No, and he's coming to get you. Terrifying. It just gives that extra like, am
Yeah.
I safe?
Yeah, that gave me like a physical, like sort of shiver watching this film.
Right.
And it actually makes me want to watch it again, though, to see that. Because I think the first time you watch that movie, it's great in like what it builds and then what happens and how he loses it and then like, how he starts trying to kill his family. But also knowing that that's coming, seeing those things, and then you're just like, that would be interesting to see. Knowing that this is what's coming, he's about to kill his family. So starting to notice
Wait,
those
he
like
kills his family?
places.
A spoiler alert.
Tries to.
If Kubrick made films more often, he would have. It's possible he would have displaced other ones on my list. Like
Yeah.
2001: Space Odyssey is one of my absolute favorites. I love Kubrick, and regardless of if this wasn't a faithful adaptation, it is just such a masterclass in filmmaking and cinematography.
Agreed.
That's such a good telling of a story. So that's my
Okay.
number one.
My number one is going to be a sort of a mixed thing. Like as it turns out, everything on my list, multiple parts. So it actually started as a book, in the probably 70s. The TV show actually started in the 70s, but was still running in the 80s, and that's when I started watching it. So that's why I'm counting it. Spawned numbers of books and the TV series. The TV series actually just recently got a reboot in the last few years. But this had a huge impact on my life. Didn't turn me into a dolphin trainer because I'm actually not good at math and science, but it made me want to be a vet. And for a very long period of my life, I mean, maybe a decade, it was something that really had me very interested in this. I actually shadowed a vet. Like, this was something I was really, really serious about. And my number one is All Creatures Great and Small.
I'm out. She copies you. Your number one last time, top five, All Creatures Great and
It's
Small.
that good.
It is that,
It is that good.
and hold on though,
Okay.
because I read those books first. I'm older than him, so I could read before he could read. Also,
she was older, but I could read first.
I read the books first. I started watching the series. So if any of it, worked for him, latched on to him, it was because of me. So I claim it first, even though maybe he talked to you about it first.
And
when you first said hold on, though, I thought you were going to put it on like your top one.
Oh, no. He did his top one
Right.
was the animals, and
Yeah.
And it hits every single emotion from like absolute comedy of like tricky woo. I absolutely love anything
Dog.
related to this like rich dog that
Shit,
gets
like a Shih Tzu, I think, or
drinking
something.
drinking champagne, fed caviar, to these like
Always like coming in with
yes,
some problem because the
right.
owner spoils it,
Yes.
feels bad,
There you
gives
go.
it these like things that probably give it like what's that liver thing when cats and Charlemagne
yeah.
had it, remember?
I can't remember the term, but yes,
Yeah.
to
Anyway.
like just devastatingly sad moments to
Yeah.
everything in between that, and it takes place
And comedy,
like
pancreatitis.
yes,
Pancreatitis. Gotcha.
and absolutely everything in between. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. It's
Great choice.
great.
You know what's funny is actually when I left after the top 5 video last time, I read it on the plane because we have that shared book thing, and I saw that it was
Oh,
on there, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna read it." So I read it
and
on the plane.
Yes.
It's great. It is great. I am
such
now a
a good
all
book.
creatures great and
And
small
now watch the
stan.
show
Such
because
a
the
good.
show is absolutely phenomenal.
I
Have
haven't
you
got to the
watched
shows yet.
have you watched the new one? Because I can't. I mean, I've tried.
How far
It
did you
just
get?
doesn't like one episode or two
I've
episodes.
watched more than
I
an
can't.
episode.
I can't.
It's
You
so good.
can.
No,
You
it's really
I'm so attached to the classic. And to me, like there are times something does something a little bit different and maybe that helps make it feel different. But that to me, it's like trying to be the same and not, and it's just,
it's
I can't. I'm so attached to those characters, those actors.
I feel like this does a great job for younger audiences. Like whoever it is that takes care of the home, she's
Hmm.
much younger in this one. And so I feel like there's a very different kind of dynamic that is in here, but it is absolutely phenomenal. It's not going to replace so one of the characters, Tristan, which I think is one of the fan favorite characters because he's a little bit of a troublemaker. My heart is still with the original because that is the fifth Doctor, Peter Davidson from Doctor Who. This is still a great interpretation, and I do recommend continuing through it. It is
Right,
it
just
is
start
in
from
my
the new
library.
one.
I think it's in the library,
The
so
think so.
you
original
should be
one
able to.
is so great though. And like he said, it has the fifth doctor, but it
Listen, I
is
wasn't
so
born
great.
in the '80s. I can't watch
I mean,
anything way back
apparently
then.
you were.
Oh yeah, I was on the cusp of the '80s. All right. Well, my number one is a movie that shouldn't have been made. It
Sounds
has
like you're doing a stinker.
no. It
I
like
know.
I mean more like the way that this movie was made, like it had everything going against it,
Okay.
and so it also led the way for current CGI and how we film movies. And this movie is Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And the reason I say that
So
this
great.
movie shouldn't exist is that, this movie was made by Disney, by Touchstone, by their like older audience production company. And what happened was they were able to use other characters that weren't Disney, such as Warner Brother characters, Hanna-Barbera characters. And at first, they were only allowed a couple of the characters to use, and they were only allowed to use characters if like the equal character had equal screen time. So
Okay.
like Mickey and Bugs had to share screen time. Donald and Daffy had to share screen time. So none of them have longer over the other. And
Okay.
eventually, Warner Brothers only gave them 5 characters to use, and they just said, take more, take more, take more. They actually filmed all of the movie before any of the animation was added to the movie. Meaning, kind of like what we do now with CGI is they film the movie first and they add the CGI in afterwards. So every mark that the actors had to hit, they had to be looking at their characters and looking at their eyes. And at one point, Bob Hoskins, the actor that plays Eddie Valiant, misses his eye mark, and the animators had to draw Roger standing taller, like in a weird way, so that he would meet that eye line.
Oh.
And they painstakingly drew 7 different shades of shadow and light hitting these animations to make them feel like they were in these real environments. And there's a famous scene called Bumping the Lamp, where Eddie Valiant is handcuffed to Roger Rabbit, and they're in this like speakeasy room, and this lamp is swinging back and forth, and he's dragging Roger around, and as that lamp is swinging, the shades of light and shadow, how they hit Roger, make him feel like he's in the actual environment.
Mm.
Very cool. Movie should have been made. It paved the way. It is my number one. Friend Roger Rabbit.
Pretty awesome.
I like it.
But with that, our special episode of Top 5 80s Entertainment has come to an end. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark.
I'm Sterling.
I'm Bronwen. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Oh, thanks for being here. We couldn't have done it without you. This is Road Goes Ever On, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.